Hey guys, welcome to Fresh Ink Online. My name is Gerard Way, and the people at Fresh Ink have asked me to host this week's segment. So I'm your guest host this week, and they asked me to bring some of my favorite comics. I have lots of favorite comics. A lot of them tend to be older, from the 90s, and although I do like some new books as well. But the books I'm going to be talking about today, with the exception of maybe one or two of them, are a little harder to find, a little more obscure, maybe things I've mentioned in passing, but some of these things you might not have ever even seen. But I'm going to start off with the book that's easiest to find, one of my favorite superhero books, and that book is New Frontier by Darwin Cook and Dave Stewart, who is actually the colorist on The Umbrella Academy. This is probably one of my favorite superhero adventure comics of all time, and it is saying some very important things in here. There's a lot of things that have to do with the very specific era of the 60s and the New Frontier, and kind of that hopefulness that came with the Kennedy administration, and it's definitely a product kind of its era, and it puts it all under a microscope. There's some really amazing stuff in here, and this is one of the first times I'd actually seen color kind of done like this. Some of it's like a painting. It's like a really amazing cross between the way they used to color comics kind of in the 60s and this kind of painted 60s almost travel poster style, and that's how most of it looks. This was a very inspiring book to write The Umbrella Academy because it was just fun, and it said important things, but it was just really great adventure. And it was the first time I had loved very basic superheroes like the Justice League in a very long time. So that's why this is one of my picks. So the next book I'm going to talk about is a Grant Morrison comic. Now, everybody knows I really love Grant Morrison. In this kind of crazy adventure, in being in the band and starting the comic, he and his wife are some of the people I've been very fortunate to meet and become friends with, and they kind of, for a while, are actually kind of like looking out for me and giving me some really amazing advice. Actually, oddly enough, very little advice in terms of writing the comic did I get from Grant. It was more larger kind of life advice that I would apply. I think his simple advice for writing The Umbrella Academy was, well, you already know what you're doing, just do it. Like, you already know how to communicate with people, so you've been communicating with people, it's no different. You know what you're doing. So that was, he gave me a lot of confidence early on, but his run on Doom Patrol really inspired me a great deal, kind of for its, how bizarre it was, its eclecticness, and things like that. But now I'm going to talk about something that was just re-released by Vertigo, which is Kill Your Boyfriend. And this was out of print for a long time, and I originally got it when it came out, and I believe it wasn't a prestige like this, it was just a floppy. Philip Bond is the artist, and Philip Bond is actually one of my favorite artists. He did a lot of early work on Tank Girl, along with Jamie Hewlett, and he kind of comes from that kind of group of guys that were kind of almost doing like guerrilla comics at the time, and their art styles are very pop culture inspired, or even a little bit punk rock in a weird way. And this is a fantastic book. I mean, one of the things you got to keep in mind when you're reading it is kind of the era it came out. I mean, there is a blatant scene where this girl and this guy kill her boyfriend. They just shoot him, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's really crazy. There's like a psychedelic bust. There's lots of drugs. There's references to Dungeons and Dragons. This comic is pretty amazing, and it's short. I mean, one of the things I like about Grant's work sometimes is, he won't draw something out. This was his idea, and this was it. We Three is the same way. It's very compact and very short, and he says what he wanted to say, and he gets out. When he has a lot to say about a certain subject, he will, do something as large as The Invisibles, but the beauty of his writing is he could do something like this, too, which is just in and out. So, Kill Your Boyfriend. The next book I'm going to talk about is a Dark Horse book, not just because it's my home, because I love Dark Horse, but there's a lot of comics on Dark Horse that inspired me, and not only just as a musician, but as a comic writer. And one of the books that had the biggest impact was under the Zombie World header. I think my friend John Rivera had got this for me for my birthday. This one's called Champion of the Worms. It's written by Mike Mignola, and it's drawn by Pat McEwen. I think that's how you say his name. I don't want to mess it up. This is just a fun comic. The art is a cross between some almost very detailed European stuff like Jeff Darrow and Tintin. I mean, it's really, and I hate to even compare, like, I think the artist would probably enjoy the Tintin reference, though. It's unbelievably gorgeous. It's very tight and compact. You're in this world where you actually don't know where you are, and it doesn't matter, which was one of the things that really inspired Umbrella Academy. You're in a city, but it's not really referred to which city you're in. The cops look weird. Everything looks like it's Europe circa, 58 or something. You can't even really tell. And it's just this little group of investigators. They're stopping this mummy attack at a museum, basically. And I think this is a book, too, that's kind of rarely seen and not talked about a lot, but I think it was a very important kind of adventure comic. And Mike Mignola, Pat McEwen, Champion of the Worms. The next book I'm going to be talking about is a manga, and I guess it could be considered a manga because it comes from Japan and it's a comic. I don't read a whole lot of manga. I like things like Astro Boy and Speed Racer as a cartoon, and I love Akira. Katsuhiro Otomo being my favorite comic artist of all time. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with Akira. I'm sure most of you are also familiar with Tech on Kincrete, since it had been brought over to America as a cartoon. Its alternate title over here for some time was called Black and White. And I'm going to be talking about another book by that artist, and his name is Taiyo Matsumoto. And this one's called Number 5, which oddly enough has no connection to the Number 5 in the Umbrella Academy. But it does involve a group of agents that are numbered, which isn't a totally new thing. But in this, one of them goes rogue and is killing all the others that are trying to hunt him down. This is one of the best comics I've ever gotten my hands on, simply because it's also very gorgeous. It's hard to explain this art. I think the best way I would describe it is if Mobius was trying to emulate the cover of the Beatles' Revolver, and that is the total art style in here. Here's like just a good shot of all the characters, and it's kind of crazy looking. You can start to see, and it's very loose. A lot of it almost looks like it was drawn with one motion sometimes, and this is a really amazing comic. The dialogue is great. There's weird pop culture references. So this is, I think, not as easy to find as a lot of other things. So that's why I'm suggesting you guys try to find this book. It's just extremely interesting. It's very inspiring. Every time I pick this up, it makes me want to draw. So that's Number 5 by Taiyo Matsumoto. So the last comic I'm going to talk about is the most important comic to me in my collection. I was going to SVA in New York City, and I would often go out to dinner with Joey Cavalieri, who is my writing instructor. He's also an editor at DC and a great guy. A lot of times I would hang out with him and Andy Helfer, and sometimes after dinner at the Kiev or something, we'd end up going to St. Mark's Comics. And one of the days we went in, Joey picked up this comic, and he said, "You ever heard of this comic? You ever heard of Al Columbia?" And I said, "No, I have no idea who Al Columbia is." And he got me this comic, and this comic is called The Biologic Show. This is issue 0. Now, there's only 2 issues of this. Issue 0, issue 1. After that, I believe Al stopped doing it. Al Columbia is really interesting because he's pretty elusive, and there's all these there's this crazy mythology around him. My wife, though, actually ended up getting in touch with him, got me a piece from The Biologic Show. And it's the kind of thing that it was so moving to me because, I wouldn't even have realized that the original artwork existed somewhere. He's that hard to track down, and his work is that hard to track down. But this is the single darkest, most messed up comic I've ever read in my entire life. And it inspired me for many, many years later, even to this day. Nothing I even do in my comics is even close to this, how dark this is. I think the closest I come is with my music, but even that has, it doesn't even come that close. There's a strip in here in particular called Little St. Anthony. It is one of the most depressing, grimmest things ever, and also the most funny. I mean, it has a really great sense of humor, and the art is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, this is the most influential comic to me ever. So apparently there's either a film or a book coming out about Al Columbia, and he's definitely an artist you should check out because his work is literally like nobody else's. And you could actually see, after you discover him, you'll see artists that were inspired by him. It's the most unique thing I own. Hey guys, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. You could join your regular host, Blair Butler, next week on g4tv.com/freshink. And it's actually one of my favorite shows to watch on the web, and it's one of my favorite shows actually to be interviewed on. That was actually one of my favorite interviews ever when we did the interview at Comic-Con. Other than that, it's been great hanging out with you. Please check out my book, The Umbrella Academy. I'm actually writing the 6th issue right now, and I have 3 more days that I need to be finished in, so I'll let you know how that's going, and you could check that out. But other than that, thanks for having me. Bye-bye.